Imagine this, the ancient world's most powerful repository of human knowledge, a place where scholars from across the known world came to study, a library so vast that it contained hundreds of thousands of manuscripts, ancient texts on mathematics, astronomy, medicine, philosophy, engineering, original works from the greatest minds of antiquity. It all burned.
Not in one catastrophic event, but gradually, over centuries, through a combination of fire, conquest, religious zealotry, and neglect. The Great Library of Alexandria held the accumulated knowledge of human civilization. When it was destroyed, we lost not just books, we lost an entire era of scientific advancement. We lost knowledge that might have changed the
course of human history. This is the story of the Great Library of Alexandria and how the world's greatest collection of ancient knowledge was destroyed. The Library of Alexandria was founded around 300 BC, during the Ptolemaic period, when Egypt was ruled by one of Alexander the Great's generals. The library was part of
a larger complex called the Mycenaeon, which means the home of the Muses. It wasn't just a library, it was a research institution. It had lecture halls, it had living quarters for scholars. It was essentially the world's first university. The goal was ambitious. The rulers of Alexandria wanted to collect all the knowledge in the world under one roof. They did this systematically. Ships arriving in the port of Alexandria were searched. If they had any books or manuscripts, those books were confiscated and brought to the library. A copy was made, and the copy was returned to the ship, but the original stayed in Alexandria. Some sources suggest that the library sent out agents to buy manuscripts from across the known world. They spared no expense. They wanted every text available. Scholars were recruited from across the Mediterranean and beyond. The library employed people whose job was just to translate texts into different languages so that the knowledge would be accessible to more people. By the time the library reached its peak, it contained an estimated 700,000 manuscripts. Some sources say it was even larger than that. That's an almost incomprehensible amount of written knowledge. This included works by the greatest philosophers of ancient Greece, works on mathematics and geometry, medical texts, engineering treatises, histories, biographies, religious texts from different cultures, scientific observations. The library was essentially a complete record of human knowledge up to that point. The library was so valuable that it was protected. Kings invested in its expansion. Scholars traveled from across the world to study there. If you wanted to understand mathematics, you came to Alexandria. If you wanted to learn about medicine, you came to Alexandria. If you wanted access to the world's knowledge, you came to Alexandria. For several centuries, the library served this role. It was the intellectual center of the world. But then, the decline began. Around 47 BC, Julius Caesar arrived in Egypt. He was pursuing his rival Pompey, and he came into conflict with Ptolemy XIII. There was fighting in Alexandria. During this conflict, a fire broke out. Some ancient sources say Caesar deliberately set it. Others say it was accidental. Either way, the fire spread. Several sources suggest that a significant portion of the library's collection was lost in this fire. How much? Nobody really knows. Ancient sources are vague. Some claim that only a small part was destroyed. Others suggest that the loss was catastrophic. The truth is probably somewhere in between. But the fire under Caesar was just the beginning. Over the following centuries, Alexandria was conquered and reconquered. It was conquered by the Romans. Then later it was caught up in the Christian religious wars. Religious violence was raging throughout the Mediterranean and Middle East. There were conflicts between different Christian sects. There were conflicts between Christians and pagans, and there were conflicts after the Islamic expansion in the 7th century. The library's contents reflected pagan philosophy and Greek scientific thought. Some of this was seen as incompatible with Christian doctrine. Religious leaders began to view the library as a repository of pagan superstition and heresy. Around 400 AD, the pagan temples of Alexandria were destroyed or converted to churches. The library, which was associated with pagan learning, came under threat.
Some sources describe Christian zealots destroying manuscripts. How extensive was this destruction? Again, ancient sources are unclear, but it seems that a significant portion of the collection was lost during this period. The library continued to decline. By the 7th century, when the Islamic expansion reached Egypt, the library was a shadow of what it
Once was. Some sources suggest that by this point, the library's collection had already been substantially depleted by the fires and the religious conflicts. When the Arab general Amr ibn al-As conquered Alexandria, he found a library that was far smaller than its historical peak. Some accounts claim that he ordered the destruction of the remaining manuscripts, allegedly saying that if the books agreed with the Quran, they were unnecessary, and if they disagreed, they were heretical. But historians debate whether this actually happened or if it's just a legend. What's clear is that by the 9th century, the Great Library of Alexandria, as an institution, was gone. Some of its collection had been moved, some of it had been destroyed, some of it had been lost to neglect. The building itself eventually fell into disrepair and was destroyed. By the Middle Ages, the library was completely forgotten. For centuries, people didn't even know exactly where it had been located. What makes the destruction of the library so historically significant is what we lost. We don't have complete works from most of the ancient Greek philosophers. We have fragments, we have quotes from other authors, we have later commentaries. But the original texts are gone. We don't have complete catalogs of ancient scientific knowledge. We don't have detailed records of ancient engineering techniques. We don't have comprehensive histories of ancient civilizations. Historians and scholars have spent centuries trying to reconstruct what was in the library based on references in surviving texts. When they do, they realize how much knowledge was lost. We have 7 plays by Sophocles, but we know that he wrote over 100. We have a few works by the ancient mathematician Euclid, but not his complete output. We have fragments of medical knowledge from Galen and Hippocrates, but not complete medical texts. The loss of these works set back human knowledge significantly. Some scholars argue that the destruction of the library delayed scientific progress by centuries. Ancient mathematicians and engineers had developed sophisticated knowledge about geometry, mechanics, and physics. If this knowledge had been preserved and built upon, the scientific revolution might have happened earlier. Medical knowledge from the ancient world was lost, and medicine essentially had to start over during the Renaissance. Engineering techniques that the Romans and Greeks had developed were forgotten and had to be rediscovered. There's also the question of what knowledge was lost that we don't even know about. We can't even speculate what we don't know existed. There were probably texts in the library that discussed concepts and ideas that we have no record of. There were probably scientific observations and theories that were lost forever. History might have been completely different if that knowledge had been preserved. The destruction of the Great Library of Alexandria is ultimately a tragedy about the fragility of knowledge. In our modern age, we have the internet. We have digital copies of texts spread across the world. We have redundancy. Information is backed up multiple times in multiple locations. But in the ancient world, knowledge was fragile. A library could burn. A conquest could result in destruction. Religious zealotry could result in manuscripts being burned. And all of that knowledge could be lost forever. The Great Library of Alexandria reminds us that knowledge is precious and fragile. It reminds us that we need to protect it. It reminds us of what we stand to lose if we become careless with the information and learning that society has accumulated. The library was one of humanity's greatest achievements, but it didn't survive. Its loss is a sobering reminder that even